Story 1. The bridge that charges a different toll. The toll booth appeared on I-77 in West Virginia at exactly 3:33 a.m., materializing out of fog that hadn't been there moments before. I'd driven this route for 11 years, twice weekly, hauling automotive parts from Charlotte to Cleveland, and there had never been a toll booth on this stretch. West Virginia doesn't have tolls on I-77. The state eliminated them decades ago. But here it was, a single lane forcing all traffic through, barrier arms down, yellow light pulsing in the pre-dawn darkness, and a figure in the booth waiting with the patience of something that had been standing there for centuries. My name is Robert Chen, and I paid a toll that night that had nothing to do with money. The cost was something else entirely, something I'm still paying in installments every time I close my eyes and see what that booth attendant showed me. Every time I remember what he took in exchange for passage, every time I realize that some roads charge fees that have nothing to do with infrastructure maintenance and everything to do with harvesting something far more valuable than currency. I slowed as I approached, checking my mirrors for other vehicles. The highway behind me was empty, had been empty for the past 40 miles, which was unusual even for overnight travel. The road ahead disappeared into fog thick enough that my headlights barely penetrated 15 feet. The toll booth sat in a pool of sickly yellow light, the barrier arm down across my lane, a detour impossible due to concrete barriers that channeled all traffic through this single point. The attendant stood motionless in the booth, visible through glass that was too clean, too clear, too modern for the weathered wooden structure that housed it. He wore a uniform that looked simultaneously like a standard toll collector's outfit and like something from a much earlier era. The cut was wrong, the fabric texture unusual, the buttons tarnished in ways that suggested age measured in generations rather than years. I rolled down my window as I stopped. The attendant leaned out through his window and I saw his face clearly for the first time. He looked normal, middle-aged, weathered, the kind of face you'd expect on someone who'd worked night shifts for decades. But his eyes were wrong, not in color or shape, but in depth. They looked like they went back further than a human skull should allow. Like I was seeing through holes into some vast darkness that existed behind his face. "Toll," he said, his voice flat and expectant. "I didn't think there were tolls on this highway." "There are always tolls. Some roads charge money. This road charges something else." He gestured to a handwritten sign mounted inside the booth, prices listed in units I didn't recognize. Not dollars, not cents, not any currency notation I'd ever seen. Just symbols, crude drawings of objects, concepts, abstractions that my brain struggled to interpret. "I don't understand. What's the toll?" "Depends on your cargo. Physical goods are easy. Standard currency accepted. But you're carrying something else, something additional. I can smell it on you." He inhaled deeply, theatrically. "You're carrying guilt, fresh guilt, something that happened recently, something you feel responsible for, something that sits heavy in your consciousness. That's the toll for passage tonight. You give me the guilt, and I raise the barrier." I felt cold spreading through my chest. That's not how tolls work. That's exactly how tolls work. You pay a price for passage. Usually money, which is just a representation of time and labor. But some roads want different payments. This road wants emotional weight. You give me your guilt, all of it, every ounce, the memory and the feeling and the responsibility, and you drive through free of that burden. The barrier raises. You continue to Cleveland. You arrive on schedule. You deliver your cargo. Everything proceeds normally except you'll be lighter, unburdened. "I'm not giving you my guilt. That's insane." He shrugged, his movements too fluid, like his joints bent in extra directions. "Then you don't pass. You sit here until morning when this booth doesn't exist anymore and you're blocking a highway that doesn't have toll facilities." Police will arrive. Questions will be asked. Your schedule will be destroyed. Your cargo will be late. Your company will demand explanations you can't provide. I considered turning around, backing up, finding an alternate route. But the fog had closed in behind me, thick as a wall, impenetrable. The highway I'd driven down had disappeared into white nothing. The only direction available was forward through the booth after paying whatever price this wrong attendant demanded. "What guilt?" I asked, stalling. "I haven't done anything." 3 weeks ago, the accident in Virginia. The car that merged into your lane too quickly. You swerved, avoided collision, but forced them onto the shoulder. They overcorrected, rolled 3 times, ended up in the ditch. Driver died on impact. You kept driving because you had a schedule, because stopping would mean police reports and delays and potential liability. You convinced yourself it wasn't your fault. They merged improperly. They overcorrected. Their death was a result of their mistakes, not yours. But you know the truth. If you'd braked instead of swerving, if you'd taken the hit instead of avoiding it, they'd still be alive. That guilt is eating you. I can see it, I can smell it, and I want it. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The accident was real. I'd seen it in my mirrors, the car rolling, metal crumpling, glass spraying across the shoulder. And I'd kept driving because stopping felt dangerous, because accepting responsibility felt impossible, because I'd rationalized that it wasn't my fault, even as my conscience screamed otherwise. How do you know about that? This booth knows everything about every driver who approaches. We see your cargo, physical and emotional. We assess value. We determine toll. For you, tonight, the toll is that guilt. Give it to me and you pass. Keep it and you sit here until reality catches up with you. What does giving you guilt mean? How does that work? He reached through his window, extending his hand, palm up. Touch my hand. Think about the accident. Think about the guilt. Feel it fully, the weight, the shame, the knowledge that you could have prevented a death but chose schedule over life. Feel it completely and then let it go. Transfer it to me. I'll take it. I'll own it. It won't be yours anymore. I should have refused. Should have sat there and waited for morning, accepted whatever consequences came. But the guilt had been destroying me for 3 weeks. I'd barely slept, replaying the accident constantly, seeing that car roll in my mirrors every time I closed my eyes. The weight was unbearable. And this attendant was offering to remove it, to take that burden and make it not mine anymore. I reached out, touched his palm. His skin was cold, wrong temperature, wrong texture, like touching leather stretched over something that wasn't bone. I thought about the accident, felt the guilt fully, the sick certainty that I'd killed someone through my choices, that I'd valued my schedule over a human life, that I'd driven away from a death I'd caused. And then I felt it lift. The guilt detached from my consciousness like a physical object being removed, a weight that had been pressing on my chest suddenly gone. The memory remained. I could still recall the accident, still see the car rolling, but the emotional content was absent. I remembered it like watching a movie, detached, no longer feeling responsible or ashamed or burdened. The guilt was gone, transferred, no longer mine. The attendant closed his hand around what I'd given him, pulling it back into the booth. He smiled and his teeth were too white, too numerous. Toll paid. Safe travels. The barrier arm raised. The fog ahead thinned slightly, revealing highway continuing into darkness. I drove through, accelerating back to speed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The guilt was gone. I was free of it. The accident was just a memory now, something that had happened but no longer affected me emotionally. I drove for 20 miles before I realized what I'd lost. The guilt had been horrible, but it had been real. It had been appropriate. I had contributed to someone's death through my choices, and feeling guilty about that was the correct human response. Without the guilt, I was something less than human. I was someone who could remember causing a death and feel nothing. The emotional weight had been removed, but so had my conscience, my empathy, my ability to care about the consequences of my actions. I tried to feel guilty about giving away my guilt. Couldn't. That emotion was gone too, removed when I'd transferred the original guilt to the attendant. I'd given him the guilt, and he'd taken my capacity for guilt along with it. I was hollowed out now, functional but empty, capable of remembering my actions but incapable of caring about their moral weight. The miles passed. I drove automatically, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, mind processing nothing. When I reached Cleveland and delivered my cargo, I did so efficiently, mechanically, without the satisfaction or frustration or boredom that normally accompanied completions. I was operating correctly but feeling nothing. Over the following weeks, I noticed other absences. I couldn't feel guilt about anything anymore. When I made mistakes, I corrected them mechanically without the emotional response that should have accompanied error. When I hurt people through carelessness, I noted their pain intellectually but felt no remorse. When I failed to meet obligations, I adjusted my schedule without the shame that should have motivated improvement. The guilt had been connected to everything, to my conscience, to my empathy, to my ability to feel responsible for my impact on others. Removing it had removed a fundamental part of my humanity, leaving me functional but hollow, capable of action but incapable of caring about consequences. I tried to find the toll booth again, drove I-77 through West Virginia dozens of times, always at night, always around 3:33 a.m. Never found it. The booth appeared once, took what it wanted, and vanished. The road no longer charged me toll because I had nothing left worth taking. I'd already paid with the part of myself that made me human. Other drivers have reported similar experiences. Toll booths that appear on highways that don't have tolls, attendants who charge prices in emotions and memories and pieces of personality. Each driver pays something different: guilt, grief, fear, love, hope. Each thinks they're getting relief, liberation from emotional burden. Each discovers too late that those burdens were essential, that removing them removes something fundamental, that some weights are meant to be carried because carrying them is what makes us human. I delivered the automotive parts successfully, arrived on schedule. Company was pleased with my performance. I've continued driving, hauling cargo from Charlotte to Cleveland twice weekly, passing through West Virginia in the dark, early morning hours. The toll booth never appears again because I have nothing left to pay. But I see other drivers stopped sometimes, pulled over on the shoulder near where the booth appeared for me, sitting in their cabs with engines off and lights on, making decisions about what they're willing to surrender in exchange for passage. Some refuse and wait until morning, accepting delays and consequences. Others pay, driving away lighter and hollower, believing they've been freed when really they've been emptied. The bridge that charges a different toll is still operating, still appearing to drivers who carry emotional cargo worth harvesting, still offering to remove burdens that should never be removed, still taking pieces of humanity in exchange for passage, still leaving drivers functional but hollow, capable of operating vehicles but incapable of caring about where they're going or why. I continue driving because that's what I do. I haul cargo, I follow schedules, I meet deadlines, I do everything correctly and efficiently and without error. But I do it all without feeling anything, without caring, without the emotional responses that make labor meaningful rather than mechanical. The guilt is gone, and so is everything else that made me more than a machine. The toll booth took what I offered and took everything connected to it. I paid for passage and lost myself in the transaction. The barrier raised, I drove through, and I've been hollow ever since, functional, empty, human in form but not in substance, operating correctly but feeling nothing, moving forward because stopping would require caring about destination, and I no longer have the capacity to care about anything at all. The toll was paid, the price was everything, and I didn't understand the cost until it was too late to refuse the transaction. The bridge charges what you're willing to give. And if you give it guilt, it takes your conscience. If you give it fear, it takes your caution. If you give it grief, it takes your love. Whatever you surrender, it takes everything connected to that emotion, leaving you diminished, hollowed, less than you were before. I am less. I will always be less. The toll booth ensured that. And somewhere in West Virginia, it's still waiting for the next driver who thinks that emotional burden is something you can pay away without consequence, who believes that relief from guilt or fear or grief is worth whatever price a wrong attendant demands. It's not worth it. The burden is the cost of being human. Removing it removes your humanity. The toll booth knows this. The attendant smiles because he knows what you're giving up, what you'll lose, how hollow you'll become. But drivers keep stopping, keep paying, keep driving away lighter and emptier, keep learning too late that some tolls cost everything. I learned. I'm still learning. Every day, every delivery, every mile driven without feeling, without caring, without the emotional content that makes experience meaningful rather than mechanical. The toll was paid, the barrier raised. I drove through, and I've been paying the real cost ever since. The cost of being functional but hollow, capable but empty, alive but not really living. The bridge that charges a different toll is waiting. For you. For every driver who thinks emotional burden is something you can surrender, without losing yourself. Don't stop, don't pay. Drive until morning, accept delays, accept consequences, but keep what makes you human. Keep the guilt and the grief and the fear and everything else that weighs heavy. Because those weights are proof that you're still capable of caring, still connected to your actions, still human in substance and not just form. I paid. I'm hollow, I'm empty, I'm less. Don't make my mistake. The toll isn't worth the passage. The price is everything you are. And once you've paid, you can never get it back. Story 2. The way station that measures your remaining days. The digital scale at the Arizona way station on I-10 east of Phoenix showed numbers that didn't correspond to weight when I rolled across it at 2:47 p.m. on June 8, 2024. Instead of the expected 78,000 pounds for my loaded rig, the display flickered and settled on 11,947. No unit designation, no indication of what was being measured. Just that number, glowing amber in the harsh desert sunlight, while the inspector approached my cab with an expression that suggested he understood exactly what the scale was telling him, and that the information wasn't good. My name is David Martinez, and I spent 3 days at that way station learning that some scales measure remaining time rather than current mass, that numbers can represent days left instead of pounds carried, that government facilities sometimes hide equipment that quantifies mortality, showing drivers exactly how much road they have left before the final destination that everyone reaches eventually, but no one can avoid. The inspector was young, maybe 25, wearing a standard Arizona DOT uniform that looked legitimate except for a patch on his shoulder that didn't match any state agency I recognized, a symbol that looked like an hourglass bisected by a highway, with sand grains falling into the shape of a truck. He climbed up to my window without asking for documents, without running through the standard inspection protocol, just looking at me with an expression somewhere between pity and professional detachment. 11,847, he said quietly. That's your count. That's what you're carrying. That's not my weight. My loaded weight is 78,000. I have the certified scale receipt from loading. Something's wrong with your equipment. Equipment is functioning perfectly. It's just not measuring what you think it's measuring. He pulled out a tablet, entered my truck number, cross-referenced something. You're David Martinez, age 43, professional driver for 19 years. Clean record, Healthy by all standard medical metrics. The scale says 11,147. That's approximately 32 years, 4 months. More time than most drivers I see. 32 years, what are you talking about? The scale measures remaining operational lifespan. It quantifies how many days you have left before terminal failure. For humans, we call that death. For vehicles, we call it decommission. For cargo, we call it expiration. This scale measures all of it. How many days the driver has left, how many miles the truck has left, how much time the cargo has before spoilage or obsolescence. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the reveal that this was some elaborate prank. None came. He just stood there, tablet in hand, reading information that supposedly told him when I was going to die. This is insane. Scales don't measure lifespan. This one does. It's an experimental installation, Homeland Security project officially. Actually something else, a device that quantifies remaining operational time for anything that crosses it. Trucks, cargo, drivers. Everything has an expiration. This scale just makes it visible, quantifiable, measurable. I don't want to know when I'm going to die. Too late. You already drove across the scale. The measurement is taken. 11,147 days remaining. You can choose not to believe it, but the count has started. Every day that passes, your number decreases by 1. Every morning you wake up, you have 1 less day than you had before. The scale just made that visible. He pulled up something on his tablet, showed me the screen. A database entry with my name, my truck information, and that number, 11,847, next to a date, October 12, 2056. That's your expiration date according to the scale. The day your count reaches 0. The day your operational lifespan terminates. I climbed out of my cab, needing to move, needing to process what I was being told. Other trucks were waiting behind me, a line forming at the way station. I watched as they rolled across the scale one by one, watched the inspector checking his tablet after each crossing, watched his expression change with each reading. Sometimes satisfied, sometimes concerned, sometimes alarmed. One driver's reading made him motion urgently for the truck to pull aside into secondary inspection. I watched as he approached that cab, had a quiet conversation, saw the driver's face go white. Whatever number that driver's scale reading showed, it wasn't good. It wasn't 11,847, it was something much smaller. What happens if the number is low? I asked when the inspector returned. Depends how low. If it's under 100, we're required to notify next of kin. Under 50, we recommend immediate medical evaluation. Under 10, we don't let them leave. Can't have drivers dying on the highway. Causes accidents. Creates liability. You keep people here based on a scale reading? Based on accurate prediction of terminal failure. The scale has been operating for 6 months. We've tested it against actuarial tables, against medical predictions, against statistical models. It's accurate within 96%. When it says someone has 10 days left, they have 10 days left, plus or minus 8 hours. We're not keeping them imprisoned. We're preventing highway fatalities. He gestured toward a building behind the way station, concrete structure with barred windows and heavy security. That's the terminal facility, for drivers whose counts are critical. We keep them comfortable, notify families, arrange final affairs. It's humanitarian, not punitive. I felt sick. This wasn't a way station anymore. It was a death prediction facility, sorting drivers into categories based on remaining lifespan, identifying who would die soon and separating them from normal traffic. This is illegal. You can't detain people based on a machine's prediction. We can, and we do. The scale is never wrong. Well, 96% accuracy. But that 4% error margin is usually timing, not outcome. Someone predicted to die Tuesday might die Wednesday instead. But they still die. The scale sees what's coming. We're just implementing policy based on the information. I walked to the scale, examining it closely. It looked like a standard truck scale. Concrete platform, electronic load cells, digital display. Nothing about it suggested advanced medical scanning capability or lifespan prediction technology. But the inspector had been certain, had shown me database entries, had demonstrated a system that was operational and apparently accurate. How does it work? How can a scale measure remaining days? I don't know the technical details. Something about quantum state analysis, cellular degradation patterns, probability field mapping. The scientists who built it used terms I didn't understand. All I know is it works. You drive across, it analyzes you, it outputs a number. That number represents days remaining until terminal failure. It's not predicting the future, it's measuring the present state and calculating trajectory. Like looking at a vehicle and estimating miles until major component failure, except applied to humans with much greater accuracy. Other drivers were being processed. Most got numbers in the thousands, years of remaining life. A few got concerning numbers in the hundreds, less than a year left. And one got a number that made the inspector immediately call for backup, made security personnel emerge from the terminal facility, made the driver get escorted away despite his protests. His number must have been critically low. Days, maybe hours. What was his count? I asked. 3. He has 3 days left. Heart attack, probably. Or stroke, something sudden and catastrophic. The scale sees it coming. We can't prevent it, but we can keep him off the highway when it happens. I watched the driver being led away, watched him arguing, pleading, insisting he felt fine. And maybe he did. Maybe he felt perfectly healthy. But the scale said he had 3 days, and the scale was 96% accurate, and the policy was clear. Critical counts meant detention until expiration. What about my count? 11,847, what does that mean for me? Means you're healthy. Means you'll probably live to 75. Means you don't need immediate medical attention. Means you're cleared to continue your route. He stamped something on his tablet, sent me an electronic clearance. You're free to go. Drive safe. And try not to think about the number. Knowing your expiration date doesn't change it. It just makes every day feel more finite. I got back in my truck, pulled away from the way station, continued east on I-10, but I couldn't stop thinking about the number. 11,147 days, 32 years and change. A specific quantified amount of time remaining. A countdown that had been invisible but was now marked, measured, made real by a scale that could see what was coming. Every day since then, I've subtracted one from the count. 11,846, 11,845, 11,844. Watching my remaining time decrease, watching the number shrink, watching my lifespan consume itself one day at a time. The scale didn't change anything. I was always going to die, always going to have a finite number of days, but making it visible, quantifiable, countable has changed everything about how I experience those days. I'm hyper-aware now of time passing. Every morning is one less day. Every delivery is another day consumed. Every mile driven is time burning away from a fixed total that keeps getting smaller. The countdown is constant, inescapable, turning every moment into a transaction where I trade another day from my finite supply for whatever I accomplish during those hours. I've tried to find the way station again. Driven I-10 through Arizona dozens of times, always slowing as I approach that section, looking for the facility, never found it. The way station exists, regular facility, standard equipment, normal inspections. But the special scale, the one that measures remaining days, only appears sometimes. Or maybe it's always there, but only certain drivers can see it. Only certain people get their countdown started. Other drivers have reported similar experiences. Way stations that display numbers that don't correspond to weight. Inspectors who talk about expiration dates and terminal failure and counts that decrease daily. Most think it's hallucination or stress or the kind of strange experience that happens on long-haul routes. But some of us know better. Some of us are counting, subtracting one each morning, watching our remaining time decrease day by day by day. I'm down to 11,702 now. 145 days have passed since I crossed that scale. 145 days subtracted from my total. 145 steps closer to October 12, 2056. The countdown continues, the number shrinks. The expiration date approaches at the steady rate of 1 day per day, unchangeable, inevitable, as certain as the scale that measured it. I don't know if the scale was accurate. Won't know until October 12, 2056, when I either die as predicted or don't. But I live like it's accurate. Live like I have exactly 11,702 days left. Live like every day matters because each one is subtracted from a fixed finite total. The way station that measures your remaining days is still operating. Still processing drivers. Still quantifying mortality, still making the invisible countdown visible, the unknown date known, the abstract concept of death into concrete number decreasing daily. And somewhere a driver is rolling across that scale right now, watching the display flicker to a number that doesn't represent pounds, learning their count, starting their countdown, beginning to subtract one per day every day forever until the number reaches 0 and the prediction proves accurate or doesn't, but either way the time has been spent and the days are gone and the count has decreased to nothing. 11,702 days remaining for me. Today. Tomorrow it'll be 11,701, the day after 11,700. The countdown continues, the scale measured it, the number is real, and every day I'm 1 day closer to 0, 1 day further from that moment at the way station when I learned exactly how many days I had left and started this endless subtraction that won't stop until I reach the final number and discover whether the scale was accurate or whether I spent 32 years counting down to a prediction that was wrong. But I don't think it's wrong. The inspector was certain, 96% accuracy, and I feel it now, the finite nature of time, the fixed quantity of days, the reality that every morning I wake with one less day than I had before. The scale just made it visible, made it countable, made it real. 11,702 days remaining and counting down, always counting down, until 0. Story 3, the rest stop where everyone speaks a language you understand tomorrow. The conversations at the Idaho rest stop on I-84 made perfect sense when I heard them, each word clear and comprehensible, grammar flowing naturally, meaning evident and precise. The problem was that no one was speaking English or Spanish or any language I'd ever heard. They were speaking something else entirely. Phonemes that shouldn't exist, syntax that violated linguistics, vocabulary from nowhere. And yet I understood every word perfectly, immediately, like my brain was accessing comprehension from a time period I hadn't reached yet, like I was hearing a language I wouldn't learn until tomorrow and wouldn't exist until next week. My name is Sarah Klein, and I spent 6 hours at that rest stop listening to conversations in a language that doesn't exist yet. Understanding words that haven't been created, following discussions about events that haven't occurred, all delivered in linguistic structures that my mind somehow comprehended despite having no prior exposure, as if the rest stop existed slightly ahead in time and my consciousness was catching up, experiencing tomorrow's language today and carrying that impossible understanding forward into a present where those words had no meaning. The first speaker was a truck driver like me, middle-aged man refilling his coffee at the vending machine. He turned to me and said something that my ears heard as nonsense. Crevix thon malar sept wodenir. But my brain interpreted instantly as coffee's terrible here, but it's hot. The meaning was clear, immediate, obvious. But the words were wrong. The sounds didn't match the language. I was understanding without translation, comprehending without recognition. I responded automatically, Better than nothing on a long drive. The words came out of my mouth in English, but his reaction suggested he'd heard something else, that my English had been translated into his language, that we were communicating across some barrier that shouldn't have been bridgeable. He nodded, smiled, continued speaking in that wrong language that I understood perfectly. "Where are you headed?" "I'm going to Portland. 8 more hours if traffic cooperates." Every word clear, every meaning obvious. But the phonemes were alien, the syntax was impossible, the language was something that shouldn't exist. I looked around the rest stop. Dozens of people, drivers, tourists, families, all speaking this same wrong language, all communicating fluently, all using words that didn't exist in any linguistic database but that my brain was interpreting without effort. And they all understood each other, all responded appropriately, all acted like this language was normal, expected, the standard communication medium. I grabbed my phone, opened the recording app, captured a few minutes of conversation. When I played it back, I heard English, normal English, standard American accents, common vocabulary, regular grammar. The recording had captured English words, even though I distinctly remembered hearing the strange language. My phone was recording what they were saying, not what I was hearing. The language existed in perception, not in reality. I approached another driver, woman in her 30s, looking at her phone. I asked in English, "Do you notice anything strange about the way people are talking?" She looked up, answered in the strange language, "Strange how? Everyone sounds normal to me." But I heard it as English. My brain translated instantly, seamlessly, making her alien words comprehensible. "What language are you speaking?" She looked confused. "English? What else would I be speaking? Are you feeling okay?" But she wasn't speaking English. I could hear the difference, could perceive the wrong phonemes, could recognize that the sounds didn't match the language even as my comprehension remained perfect. It was like watching a foreign film with subtitles, except there were no subtitles. Just direct understanding, immediate comprehension, bypassing the need for translation through some mechanism I didn't understand. I walked to the bathroom, needing space to think. Inside, a woman was washing her hands, talking on her phone in the strange language. I caught fragments. "Tomorrow, when the resonance completes, difficult to maintain cohesion before the language stabilizes. Everyone experiencing the bridge phase differently." The words came through clearly, but they referenced things that made no sense. Resonance, language stabilization, bridge phase. She was discussing something that sounded like scientific process, like we were all part of some experiment or phenomenon that was actively occurring. When she noticed me, she ended her call quickly, smiled politely, left without further conversation. But I'd heard enough. Whatever was happening at this rest stop involved language in flux, communication in transition, people speaking words that didn't exist yet but would exist soon. Once the resonance completed and the language stabilized, I found a quiet corner and observed. The more I listened, the more patterns emerged. The strange language wasn't random. It had consistent grammar, regular vocabulary, logical structure. It was a complete language system, functional and sophisticated. But it didn't exist in any present database, wasn't taught in any school, wasn't used by any culture. It was a future language, somehow accessible in this rest stop before its official existence, available to speakers who shouldn't know it yet. And everyone here knew it fluently. Drivers who'd arrived from different states, different backgrounds, different linguistic histories, all speaking this same future language, all communicating effortlessly, all acting like it was normal and expected. The rest stop had become a pocket of tomorrow, where language from the future had leaked backward, where communication operated on different rules, where today's words didn't apply and tomorrow's words were already functional. I tried leaving, walked back to my truck, intending to drive away to escape this linguistic anomaly. But when I started my engine, the dashboard displays showed text in the strange language. Not English labels, but those wrong words, those future words, perfectly comprehensible but absolutely alien. My GPS spoke directions in the strange language. My CB radio transmitted the strange language. Everything had shifted, or I had shifted, or the language had spread from the rest stop to my vehicle. I shut down the truck and returned to the rest stop building. An attendant approached. Older man, maintenance uniform, name tag that read Director of Temporal Linguistics in those strange characters that I understood perfectly despite their wrongness. "You're having difficulty with the transition," he said in the future language. "Most people adapt unconsciously, but some notice, some resist. That makes it harder. What's happening here? Why is everyone speaking a language that doesn't exist?" "The language exists, just not yet in your timeline. You're experiencing linguistic precognition. This rest stop is a resonance point where future communication patterns bleed backward, where tomorrow's words become accessible today." Most people transition smoothly. They start speaking the new language without realizing it, their brains adapting automatically. But you're consciously aware of the change. That creates cognitive dissonance. "I don't want to speak a future language. I want to speak English." "You are speaking English. English as it will exist 3 months from now, after the linguistic shift completes globally. This isn't a foreign language, it's your language, slightly evolved ahead of schedule. Everyone at this rest stop is speaking English plus 3 months. To each other we sound normal. To ourselves we sound like we always have. Only people who resist, who maintain conscious awareness of their current timeline language, experience the dissonance." He gestured around the rest stop. "In 3 months, everyone on Earth will speak this way. The language is shifting, has been shifting gradually for years, but the process accelerates soon. New words, new grammar, new phonemes. Languages evolve constantly. This rest stop just experiences that evolution ahead of schedule. We're all speaking future English, and your brain is accessing comprehension from your future self, from the you who will exist after the shift completes." "That's impossible. Languages don't change in 3 months. Evolution takes generations." "Natural evolution, yes, but this isn't natural. This is engineered. The linguistic shift is planned, coordinated, implemented through resonance points like this rest stop. By the time you leave here, you'll be carrying future English with you, spreading it to everyone you speak with, accelerating the transition. That's how the shift propagates, one speaker at a time, each one infecting their communication circle, the new language spreading virally until it's universal. I don't want to spread a future language. I want to speak my current language. You can't. Once you've been exposed to future English, once your brain has accessed the comprehension from your future self, you can't unlearn it. You'll speak future English now, even if you try to use current English vocabulary. Your words will carry the new patterns, the new phonemes, the new structures, and everyone who listens will start adapting, start shifting, start speaking like you do." I spent the next 3 hours trying to prove him wrong, tried speaking to other drivers in deliberate, careful English, using only current vocabulary, avoiding any of the strange words. But when I recorded myself, I heard the future language. My mouth said current English. My recordings captured future English. The transition had already occurred. I was already a carrier, already spreading the linguistic shift without being able to prevent it. By hour 6, I'd stopped resisting. The future English felt natural now, comfortable, like it had always been my language. Current English felt archaic, clumsy, inadequate. My brain had completed the adaptation. I'd transitioned from today's speaker to tomorrow's speaker, and the change felt right, inevitable. An improvement rather than a loss. When I finally left the rest stop, I was fluent in a language that wouldn't officially exist for 3 months, and everyone I spoke to afterward, dispatch, other drivers, truck stop workers, they all started showing signs of transition. They'd respond to my future English with confusion initially, then adaptation, then fluency. I was spreading it, infecting communication circles, accelerating the linguistic shift one conversation at a time. 3 months later, the transition completed globally. News reports called it spontaneous linguistic evolution, unprecedented rapid language development, a phenomenon where English worldwide had suddenly incorporated new vocabulary, new grammar, new phonetic structures. Linguists were baffled. Everyone else just adapted, started speaking the new way, accepted that language had changed and moved forward with the modifications. But I knew the truth. The change hadn't been spontaneous. It had been engineered, spread through resonance points, carried by drivers who stopped at rest stops that existed slightly ahead in time, infected communication circles until the new language became universal. I'd been part of the mechanism, a vector, a carrier of tomorrow's words, spreading them into today's conversations. I still stop at that rest stop sometimes. The linguistic shift has completed, so everyone speaks future English now. But the rest stop has moved forward again. Now people there are speaking future English plus 3 months, the next evolution, the next shift. And my brain is starting to comprehend it, starting to access understanding from my future self. Starting the cycle again. Language keeps evolving. The rest stops keep advancing. And drivers keep spreading the changes, carrying tomorrow's words into today's conversations. Accelerating the shift, making the future language accessible before its official time. I'm speaking words right now that didn't exist 6 months ago. You're understanding them because your brain is accessing comprehension from your future self. From the you who already knows this language, because by the time you finish reading this, the shift will have reached you too. The rest stop, where everyone speaks a language you understand tomorrow, is still operating. Still advancing ahead of timeline, still exposing drivers to future communication patterns, still spreading linguistic evolution one conversation at a time. And we're all carriers now, all speakers of tomorrow's language today. All infected with words that didn't exist yesterday but are fluent and natural now, because that's how linguistic evolution works when engineered through resonance points that exist slightly ahead in time. The language you're reading right now, it didn't exist when I started driving. It exists because I stopped at that rest stop, got exposed, became a carrier, spread it through every conversation until it became universal. And 3 months from now, there will be new words, new grammar, new language. Because the rest stops keep advancing, the drivers keep stopping, the infection keeps spreading, the linguistic evolution keeps accelerating. You'll speak it fluently, you'll understand it perfectly, you'll barely notice the change because your brain will access comprehension from your future self, and the transition will feel natural and inevitable. That's how languages evolve now, through rest stops that exist tomorrow. Through drivers who carry future words, through infections that spread understanding before official existence. The future language is already here. You're speaking it now. You just don't realize it yet because your current self hasn't learned it, even though your future self is already fluent. The rest stop waits. The next linguistic shift approaches, and drivers keep stopping, keep listening, keep understanding words that don't exist yet. Keep carrying tomorrow's language into today's conversations. The infection continues. The evolution accelerates. The future becomes present one word at a time. And we all become speakers of languages we haven't learned yet, carriers of words we don't recognize, participants in linguistic evolution that operates ahead of schedule through resonance points disguised as rest stops on highways that connect not just places but times. Story 4. The convoy that repeats your route exactly 1 hour ahead. I first noticed the convoy on I-40 westbound through New Mexico, 3 trucks running in perfect formation, maintaining exact spacing, traveling at precisely 68 miles per hour, the exact speed I'd been maintaining for the past 2 hours. They appeared in my mirrors at 2:17 p.m. on July 23, 2024, emerging from heat shimmer like a mirage, solidifying into reality. And when I checked my dashcam footage later, I saw they'd been following the same route I was traveling, passing the same exits, stopping at the same rest areas, navigating the same construction zones, all occurring exactly 1 hour before I reached those locations. My name is Thomas Rivera, and I spent 4 days being pursued by my own future, watching trucks that were driving my route ahead of me, seeing myself in mirrors that showed tomorrow's decisions, following a convoy that was somehow me from 1 hour forward in time, creating a loop where my present self followed my future self, who was following his future self in an infinite regression of truck drivers all making identical decisions, separated by 1 hour intervals stretching forward forever. The convoy consisted of 3 trucks, but as I watched more carefully, I realized they were the same truck repeated 3 times. Same model Peterbilt, same paint color, same company markings, same trailer configuration, and the same license plate. All 3 trucks had my license plate number. All 3 were exact duplicates of my vehicle. All 3 were me from different temporal positions, all traveling the same highway simultaneously. I accelerated, trying to close the distance, trying to catch up to these future versions of myself. They accelerated too, maintaining exact separation. When I hit 75 miles per hour, they hit 75. When I backed off to 65, they matched. We were synchronized, locked into identical decision-making, unable to deviate because any choice I made had already been made by the versions ahead of me. I tried my CB radio. Westbound convoy ahead. This is long haul. You're driving identical trucks to mine. Can you explain what's happening? A response came through immediately, my own voice slightly distorted. Long haul. This is long haul +1. You're following your own future. We're you from 1 hour ahead. There are 3 of us currently visible. Me at +1 hour, another at +2 hours, another at +3. We've all been where you are. We're all heading where you're heading. The loop continues forward infinitely. That's impossible. I can't be following myself. You are. Check your position against your GPS log from 1 hour ago. You'll see I'm following your exact route, making your exact decisions. Now look at the truck 2 positions ahead. That's me from 2 hours forward, following the route I'll take in 1 hour. And the third truck is me from 3 hours forward, following the route I'll take in 2 hours. We're a temporal convoy, all the same driver at different time positions, all traveling together. I checked my GPS history. The leading truck in the convoy was passing mile marker 167 right now at 2:17 p.m. According to my GPS log, I had passed mile marker 167 at 1:17 p.m., exactly 1 hour earlier. The convoy was retracing my route, following my path precisely, arriving at each location exactly 60 minutes after I had. But that meant they were behind me, not ahead. Following my past route, not leading my future route. Unless I was the one behind. Unless they were leading and I was following. Unless the temporal relationship was inverted and what I thought was my past route was actually their future route, and I was the one retracing their path 1 hour behind. Which way is time flowing? I asked over the CB. Am I following you or are you following me? Both, neither. Time is looped here. Your position 1 hour ago becomes my position now becomes the next truck's position in 1 hour. We're all traveling the same route at different temporal offsets. You're following us forward. We're following you backward. The loop is closed. The convoy is infinite. I pulled over at a rest area, needing to think, needing to process what was happening. The convoy continued past me, maintaining speed, not stopping. I watched them recede into distance, 3 identical trucks getting smaller, eventually disappearing around a curve. Exactly 1 hour later, I saw myself arrive at the rest area. Not another truck. My truck. Same unit I was sitting in, pulling into the same parking space I'd chosen. I watched myself climb out, watched myself walk toward the building with the same gait and posture I'd used an hour earlier. I was watching my own past from 1 hour forward, seeing the route I'd already traveled being traveled again by the me who was 1 hour behind. I approached the past version of myself, needing to confirm this was real. He looked up as I got close and our eyes met. It was like looking in a mirror, except the reflection was moving independently, responding to seeing me with the same shocked recognition I was feeling. "You're me," past me said, "from 1 hour ahead. You're me from 1 hour behind. I stopped here at 2:34 p.m. It's now 3:34. You're experiencing the moment I experienced 60 minutes ago. This is insane. How is this possible? I don't know. But I'm you from 1 hour forward, and there are versions of me 2 hours forward, 3 hours forward, infinite hours forward, all traveling this same route. We're a convoy of temporal duplicates, all offset by 1 hour, all making identical decisions because we're the same person at different time positions." Past me grabbed his phone, started recording this conversation. I realized I'd done the same thing 1 hour ago, had recorded this same interaction, which meant future me, the version 1 hour ahead, had footage of me having this conversation with past me. The recordings would be identical except for timestamps, infinite copies of the same event occurring at 1 hour intervals stretching forward through time. "What happens if I make a different choice?" past me asked. "If I don't follow your route, if I take a different exit or change my destination?" "I don't think you can. We're temporally locked. Any choice you make has already been made by me 1 hour ago, is being made by the version ahead of me right now, will be made by the next version in 1 hour. The decisions are predetermined by the loop. We're following the same path because we're the same person, and the timeline is fixed." Past me got back in his truck, my truck, the same vehicle I was driving except offset by 1 hour. He pulled out of the rest area, continued west on I-40. I knew his exact route because I'd driven it 1 hour ago. Every turn, every lane change, every decision. He would follow it precisely because I had followed it, because the me ahead of me had followed it, because the loop demanded identical repetition. I waited exactly 1 hour, then departed the rest area at 4:34 p.m. following the route I'd taken at 3:34, which past me was taking now at 3:34 from his time position, which future me had taken at 4:34 from his time position. The convoy reformed, 3 trucks ahead of me, all traveling my route at +1, +2, and +3 hour offsets. This continued for 4 days. I drove west across New Mexico, Arizona, into California, always following the convoy ahead, always being followed by the convoy behind. Every rest stop I'd encounter past me, arriving 1 hour after I left. Have the same conversation, watch him continue the route I'd just traveled. Every glance at my mirror showed future me following 1 hour behind, making the same decisions I was making, locked into the same temporal loop. The cargo I was hauling, electronics bound for Los Angeles, arrived on schedule. I delivered successfully, got the signed receipt, completed the job, but the convoy continued. Past me was still 1 hour behind, following my route to the delivery location. Future me was still 1 hour ahead, having already delivered the cargo, already receiving his receipt, already experiencing the completion I hadn't reached yet. The loop had a termination point. When I stopped driving, when I parked my truck at a terminal in Los Angeles and went off duty, the convoy should have disappeared. Past me should have caught up, future me should have diverged. But instead, the loop continued. I watched future me park at the terminal, watched him go off duty, watched him enter the driver's lounge. 1 hour later, I did the same, experiencing the exact sequence he'd experienced. 1 hour after that, past me arrived, repeated the sequence again. We were temporarily locked in a loop that continued even after the driving stopped. Every action I took was being taken by future me 1 hour ahead, and would be taken by past me 1 hour behind. Eating, sleeping, breathing, all synchronized at 1 hour intervals, all identical, all repeated infinitely forward and backward through time. I tried to break the loop, made a deliberate, conscious decision to deviate, turned left instead of right, chose a different meal, took an alternate route. But when I checked my GPS log from 1 hour ago, I found I'd already made those different decisions. They weren't deviations. They were part of the predetermined path. Future me had already made those choices, past me was about to make them, and I was just following the script that we'd all follow because we were all the same person experiencing the same timeline at different offsets. The loop is permanent. I'm still in it. Right now, as I write this, future me is writing these same words 1 hour ahead. Past me will write them 1 hour behind. We're all documenting the same experience at 1 hour intervals, all producing identical text, all trapped in a temporal convoy that repeats every decision infinitely. I see myself constantly now. Future me is always 1 hour ahead, past me always 1 hour behind. Everywhere I go, I'm following my own route from the previous hour and being followed by the next iteration. The convoy is infinite. If I look far enough ahead, I can see dozens of versions, all me, all traveling synchronized routes, all offset by 1 hour intervals. Other drivers see it too. They report trucks that travel in impossible formation, that repeat each other's movements exactly, that seem to be the same vehicle duplicated multiple times. They're seeing temporal convoys, other drivers caught in loops like mine, all of us traveling routes at multiple time positions simultaneously. The convoy that repeats your route exactly 1 hour ahead is still forming, still catching drivers who hit the right conditions on the right highway at the right moment, still creating temporal loops where past, present, and future travel together, where one driver becomes many drivers, where the same person experiences the same moments at infinite 1 hour offsets. I'm writing this 1 hour after future me wrote it. Past me will write it in 1 hour. The words are identical. The experience is identical. The loop is identical. We're all trapped in the same temporal sequence, making the same decisions, following the same route, forever separated by 1 hour intervals, but forever connected by being the same person at different time positions. The convoy continues, always 1 hour ahead, always 1 hour behind, always identical, always repeating, forever. If you see 3 identical trucks traveling in perfect formation on I-40 westbound through New Mexico, maintaining exact spacing, synchronized in every movement, that's me. All 3 are me. Different temporal positions, same driver, infinite repetition. Wave as you pass. Future me already saw you. Past me will see you in 1 hour. And present me is seeing you now, wondering if you're also a temporal duplicate, also caught in a loop, also experiencing multiple time positions simultaneously. The highway is full of us now, temporal convoys everywhere, all making the same drive at different hours, all following ourselves, all trapped in loops that repeat infinitely forward and backward through time. The convoy that repeats your route exactly 1 hour ahead might be you. Check your mirrors. Check your GPS history. See if the trucks around you are making identical movements at 1 hour intervals. If they are, welcome to the loop. Welcome to the temporal convoy. Welcome to experiencing yourself at multiple time positions, forever following your future, forever being followed by your past, forever driving the same route at 1 hour offsets that stretch infinitely in both directions. Future me already wrote this warning 1 hour ago. Past me will write it in 1 hour, and you're reading it now, wondering if you're about to join the convoy, about to become temporally duplicated, about to start following yourself through infinite 1 hour loops that never end. The convoy waits. 1 hour ahead, 1 hour behind, always identical, always repeating. Forever. Story 5. The fuel station where the price changes based on what you're running from. The digital display at the diesel pump showed $4.73 per gallon when I pulled in. Standard pricing for rural Nevada in August 2024. Reasonable rate for a no-name truck stop 40 miles from anywhere. But when I inserted my payment card and selected my fuel grade, the price flickered and changed to $127.89 per gallon. An impossible amount, completely non-viable, accompanied by a text message on the pump screen. Price adjusted for emotional cargo. Current fuel cost reflects weight of guilt being transported. Proceed with transaction. My name is Jennifer Wu, and I spent 3 hours at that fuel station learning that some places charge for more than gasoline. That prices can reflect internal burden rather than external commodity. That certain facilities can measure what you're carrying in your conscience and adjust their rates accordingly, making you pay in money for weights that should be paid in confession or therapy or whatever process releases guilt and shame and the accumulated mistakes that every long-haul driver carries after years of decisions made under pressure, deadlines met through compromises, and lives impacted through choices that seemed necessary at the time but haunt you afterward. I stared at the price, trying to process the number. $127.89 per gallon. My fuel capacity was 200 gallons. A full tank would cost over $25,000, more than I earned in 6 months, more than my truck was worth. Absolutely impossible to pay. This had to be a malfunction, a computer error, a system failure that was displaying nonsensical pricing. I tried a different pump. Same result. $127.89 per gallon. Same message. Price adjusted for emotional cargo. A fuel station attendant approached. Older woman, weathered face, eyes that held too much understanding. She looked at the display, looked at me, nodded slowly. That's a heavy load you're carrying, heavier than most drivers I see. What happened? What are you running from? I'm not running from anything. Your pumps are malfunctioning. Diesel doesn't cost $127 per gallon. Our pumps measure more than diesel. They measure everything you bring to the transaction. Physical cargo in your trailer, yes, but also emotional cargo in your consciousness. Guilt, shame, regret, fear. All of it has weight. All of it affects the price. You're carrying something heavy. The pumps are quantifying it, converting it to currency, adding it to the fuel cost. That's insane. You can't charge for guilt. We charge for everything. Emotional weight creates resistance, makes your truck harder to operate, reduces efficiency. You're burning extra fuel to carry that guilt around. We're just making the cost visible, explicit, quantifiable. Standard diesel is $4.73. Your guilt adds $123.16 per gallon. Together, that's your total price. I felt cold spreading through my chest. How can pumps measure guilt? Same way scales measure weight. Sensors, algorithms, analysis. The pumps scan you when you insert your card, read your psychological state, assess your emotional burden, calculate the weight you're carrying. Then they adjust the price to reflect the true cost of fueling a driver who's transporting trauma along with cargo. I'm not paying $127 per gallon. That's exploitation. Then you don't get fuel. You sit here with an empty tank, unable to continue your route, unable to meet your delivery schedule, unable to complete the job. Your choice: pay the full price, including emotional surcharge, or remain stuck. Other trucks were at different pumps, their drivers fueling successfully, prices displayed at normal rates. I walked over, checked their displays, $4.73 per gallon, $4.89's $5.12, normal prices. These drivers weren't being charged emotional surcharges, only I was being penalized for whatever guilt the pumps had detected. I approached one driver, a man in his 60s. What price are you paying for diesel? $4.89. Little high, but normal range. Why? My pumps are showing 127.89s. They say it's because of emotional cargo. He looked at me with sudden understanding, with recognition, with the expression of someone who'd been through this before. What are you carrying? What did you do? Nothing. I haven't done anything wrong. The pumps don't lie. If they're charging emotional surcharge, you're carrying guilt, heavy guilt, the kind that comes from real mistakes, real harm, real consequences. What happened? I walked away, unwilling to discuss this with a stranger, unwilling to confess whatever the pumps had detected. But he called after me. You can't outrun it. The guilt will follow you to every fuel station. Eventually you'll need diesel, and eventually you'll pay the price. Might as well pay it here, where they're at least honest about what they're charging for. I returned to the attendant, who was waiting by my pump with patient expression. Tell me what I'm supposedly guilty of. What did your pumps detect? She pulled out a tablet, showed me a detailed report. Psychological profile, stress markers, guilt indicators. And a specific incident flagged. Incident, May 14, 2024. Location, I-70, Kansas. Event, traffic accident involving civilian vehicle. Driver's actions contributed to collision resulting in hospitalization of 3 passengers. Driver departed scene without rendering aid or reporting incident. Guilt level, severe. I remembered. The car that had merged into my lane too quickly, forcing me to swerve, pushing them toward the shoulder where they'd lost control and crashed into the barrier. I'd seen it happen in my mirrors, had known they were hurt, had known I should stop. But I'd been behind schedule, had been afraid of liability, had convinced myself it wasn't my fault because they'd merged improperly, so I'd driven away. And I'd been carrying that guilt for 3 months, unable to forget, unable to stop seeing that car crashing in my mirrors. How do you know about that? How can pumps detect a specific incident? The pumps don't detect specifics. They measure guilt level and make educated guesses based on common driver incidents. But your reaction just confirmed the accuracy. You're carrying guilt from an accident you fled. That's heavy emotional cargo. That's what's creating the surcharge. I can't pay $25,000 to fill my tank. Then pay a different way. We offer alternative payment methods for emotional surcharges. You can pay in confession, full disclosure to authorities, accepting responsibility, making amends. Or you can pay in therapy, commit to professional treatment, process the guilt, reduce the emotional weight. Or you can pay in service, community work, victim support, actions that balance the harm you caused. I just want diesel. I don't want to confess or get therapy or do community service. Then pay the monetary price, $25,578 for a full tank. We accept all major credit cards. I sat in my truck trying to decide. I had $3,200 in my bank account. Couldn't afford the emotional surcharge. Couldn't accept the alternative payment methods. Couldn't continue without fuel. I was trapped by a fuel station that measured guilt and charged for emotional cargo I didn't want to acknowledge. Other drivers came and went, fueling at normal prices, their pumps displaying standard rates. They carried less guilt, or no guilt, or different types of emotional cargo that didn't trigger surcharges. Only I was being penalized because only I was carrying the specific weight of fled accident, unrendered aid, unaccepted responsibility. After 2 hours of sitting, I accepted the alternative payment. Called the Kansas State Police, reported the May 14th incident, provided my information, accepted responsibility for my role in the accident. The conversation was difficult, painful, filled with shame. But when I finished and returned to the pump, the price had dropped. Now showed $47.33 per gallon. Still higher than standard, but not impossibly high. The confession had reduced the surcharge significantly. You're still carrying guilt, the attendant explained. Confession helps, but it doesn't eliminate the emotional weight completely. You've accepted responsibility, but you haven't made amends, Haven't contacted the victims, haven't fully processed the impact. The remaining surcharge reflects remaining guilt. As you work through it, as you make amends, as you reduce the emotional burden, the price will drop further. I fueled at $47.33 per gallon, paying $9,466 for a full tank. Painful but manageable with credit. The fuel flowed normally, filled my tanks, allowed me to continue my route. But I was poorer by thousands of dollars, penalized for carrying emotional cargo I'd been trying to ignore, forced to pay in money for weight that should have been paid in accountability. I've since contacted the accident victims, offered restitution, begun therapy, worked to reduce the guilt I've been carrying. Each time I fuel, the price drops slightly. Last fill-up was $12.73 per gallon, still above standard but approaching normal range. The emotional surcharge decreases as the guilt decreases, the price reflecting my progress in processing the trauma I caused and fled. Other drivers report similar experiences. Fuel stations that charge based on emotional cargo, that adjust prices according to guilt and shame and regret being transported alongside physical goods. Most dismiss it as computer malfunction or pricing error. But some of us know better. Some of us have paid the surcharge, have learned that fuel stations can measure more than diesel, have discovered that running from guilt doesn't make it disappear. It just adds weight that eventually gets quantified and charged for. The fuel station where the price changes based on what you're running from is still operating. Still measuring emotional cargo. Still adjusting prices to reflect psychological burden. Still forcing drivers to confront what they're carrying, either by paying monetary surcharges or by accepting alternative payment methods that require confession, therapy, service, accountability. I'm still driving, still hauling cargo, still fueling regularly. The prices continue to drop as I work through my guilt, as I make amends, as I reduce the emotional weight I've been carrying. Eventually, maybe I'll fuel at standard price again. Eventually, maybe the pumps will measure only diesel and find no emotional surcharge to add. But that requires processing what I've been running from, accepting responsibility fully, making complete amends, eliminating the guilt that the pumps can detect and quantify and convert to currency. Until then, I pay the surcharge. I accept the price. I fuel at rates adjusted for emotional cargo. And I work to reduce the weight, one therapy session at a time, one amends conversation at a time, one accountability step at a time. The fuel station charges what you're carrying. The price reflects your burden. And eventually you either pay in money or you pay in the harder currency of confronting what you've been running from. I'm still paying, still working, still hoping that someday the price will return to $4.73 per gallon, indicating that the emotional cargo has been fully offloaded, that the guilt has been fully processed, that I'm finally carrying only the physical cargo in my trailer instead of the psychological cargo in my conscience. The pumps are still measuring, still adjusting, still charging for everything you bring to the transaction, including the things you wish you could leave behind but can't because guilt doesn't disappear when ignored. It just accumulates weight that eventually gets quantified and charged for at fuel stations that measure more than gasoline. Story 6. The cargo that gets lighter the further you drive. The scale at the Phoenix Distribution Center showed 83,400 pounds when I loaded. Fully legal weight, properly distributed. 47,000 pounds of commercial printing equipment secured on 43 pallets in my 53-foot trailer. Standard cargo, standard weight, standard everything. But when I crossed the California Agricultural Inspection Station 270 miles later, the scale showed 79,100 pounds. I'd lost over 4,000 pounds of cargo while driving on sealed highway with no stops, no accidents, no theft, no explanation for how 47,000 pounds of equipment had diminished to 43,000 in the time it took to cross Arizona. My name is Marcus Webb, and I spent 5 days hauling cargo that was disappearing, watching my weight decrease with every mile traveled, feeling my trailer grow lighter hour by hour, realizing eventually that some loads aren't meant to reach their destinations fully intact because the cargo itself is dissolving, evaporating, ceasing to exist in proportion to distance traveled, leaving me responsible for delivering something that was systematically vanishing during transit through processes I didn't understand and couldn't prevent. I pulled over immediately after the weigh station, needing to inspect my cargo, to verify whether the weight loss was real or just scale calibration error. I broke the security seals, violating protocol but necessary, and opened my trailer doors. The pallets were still there, all 43 of them, still secured with load straps, still positioned according to the loading diagram. But they looked different, less substantial. The cardboard packaging seemed thinner, the shrink wrap looser, the overall mass reduced in ways that were subtle but definitely real. I climbed into the trailer, examined the cargo closely. The printing equipment crates were lighter. I could feel it when I tried lifting them, could see gaps between the shrink wrap and the crates that hadn't been there at loading. Something was missing. Material had been removed, extracted, made absent. The equipment was disappearing while remaining visibly present, losing mass without losing apparent volume, becoming lighter without becoming smaller. I called the shipper, explained the weight discrepancy. The dispatcher was confused. "You're showing 4,000 pounds light? That's impossible." The cargo was weighed at loading. Seals were applied. Nothing should have changed. Something changed. The cargo weighs less now than it did in Phoenix. Either material is being removed somehow, or the scale is wrong. California agricultural scales are certified accurate. If they're showing weight loss is occurring. But I don't know how or why. Continue to delivery. We'll assess shortage at receiving. I continued west on I-10, monitoring my truck's handling, feeling the trailer's weight, sensing changes in how the rig responded. Every hour the handling improved slightly. Acceleration was easier. Braking required less distance. The overall weight was definitely decreasing. My cargo was vanishing progressively, steadily in proportion to miles traveled. At a rest area near Indio, I weighed on a CAT scale. 76,800 pounds. I'd lost another 2,000 pounds in the 100 miles since the agricultural station. The cargo was disappearing at a rate of approximately 20 pounds per mile. At this rate, by the time I reached Los Angeles, I'd arrive with nearly empty trailer, having lost most of the 47,000 pounds I'd started with. I inspected the trailer again. The pallets looked even less substantial now, the crates even lighter, the shrink wrap barely maintaining shape around diminished contents. I opened one crate, needing to see the actual equipment, to verify whether the printing press components were still present. Found them there. Metal frames, electronic assemblies, mechanical components, but they felt wrong. Lighter than metal should feel, less dense, like they were transitioning towards something else, some lower mass state, becoming lighter without changing visible appearance. I weighed individual crates using a portable scale. What should have been 200-pound units now registered 140 pounds. What should have been 500-pound assemblies now showed 380. Everything had lost approximately 30% of its mass since loading, and the loss was continuing, progressing, accelerating as I approached destination. A truck stop mechanic noticed my repeated weighing, approached with curiosity. "Having weight issues?" "My cargo is disappearing, losing mass continuously. Started at 47,000 pounds, now down to maybe 35,000, and it keeps decreasing." "Disappearing cargo? That's rare but not unprecedented. What are you hauling?" "Printing equipment, commercial press components, metal and electronics." He nodded knowingly. "Check your bill of lading." Look for notation about temporal cargo or dimensional instability. Some equipment exists in multiple states simultaneously, present here but also present elsewhere, sharing mass across parallel configurations. During transport, the mass balance shifts, more weight moving to the other configuration, less remaining here. By the time you deliver, you might arrive with minimal mass because most of it has shifted elsewhere. That's impossible. Mass doesn't just shift between dimensions. Doesn't in normal cargo, no. But certain equipment, particularly experimental manufacturing devices, prototype assemblies, technology that operates on quantum principles, it can exist partially in multiple locations simultaneously. The mass distribution changes during transport, creating the appearance of disappearing cargo. I checked my bill of lading carefully, found notation I'd missed during initial loading. Warning: cargo exhibits dimensional instability during transit. Weight loss of 40–60% normal during transport. Destination receiving prepared for reduced mass delivery. They knew. The shipper knew my cargo would disappear. They'd planned for it, had warned about it in documentation I hadn't read carefully, had prepared the receiving facility for arrival of cargo that would be substantially lighter than loaded weight. This wasn't malfunction or theft. It was expected behavior for equipment that existed in multiple dimensional states. But knowing it was expected didn't make it less disturbing. I was hauling cargo that was systematically vanishing, losing mass continuously, transitioning from heavy equipment to lightweight shadows of themselves, becoming less present in my reality while presumably becoming more present somewhere else. Some other dimensional configuration where the same equipment was gaining weight as it lost weight here. I drove through the night watching my fuel efficiency improve as the cargo lightened, feeling my truck respond more easily as the burden decreased. By the time I reached the Los Angeles delivery facility at dawn, my scale weight was 68,000 pounds, only 21,000 pounds of cargo remaining from the original 47,000. The equipment had lost over half its mass during transit, the majority having shifted elsewhere, leaving me delivering diminished versions of what I'd loaded. The receiving dock supervisor wasn't surprised. Temporal cargo delivery, we're set up for this. Don't worry about the weight loss, that's expected. The equipment is still functional, just existing partially in other configurations. When we activate it, the mass will redistribute, pulling back from wherever it shifted to, restoring full weight and functionality. Where did the mass go? Different dimensional layers, parallel configurations. The equipment exists simultaneously in multiple locations, and during transport the mass balance shifts unpredictably. You hauled it here in diminished state. Another driver somewhere else hauled the same equipment in complementary state, his cargo getting heavier as yours got lighter. Together you transported the complete mass, just split across multiple drivers in multiple realities. They offloaded my cargo, pallets that were barely substantial, crates that felt empty, equipment that looked present but felt absent. The forklift operator handled them easily, the reduced mass-making movement effortless. Whatever I'd hauled had been reduced to shadows, placeholder objects that indicated equipment should be present even though most of the actual mass had shifted elsewhere. I left the facility confused, disturbed, uncertain about what I'd actually accomplished. Had I delivered cargo? Or had I delivered the promise of cargo, the outline of cargo, the partial manifestation of equipment that existed mostly somewhere else? The payment cleared. Full rate for 47,000 pounds, even though I'd delivered 21,000. The company treated it as normal delivery, standard completion, successful transport. But I'd lost cargo. Over half of it. Watched it disappear during transit, vanish progressively, shift to other dimensional configurations while I drove. The cargo that gets lighter the further you drive had been explained, rationalized, justified. But it still felt wrong. Still felt like failure, still felt like I'd transported shadows instead of substance. Other drivers report similar experiences: cargo that loses weight during transit, equipment that becomes lighter mile by mile, shipments that arrive substantially diminished from loading weight. Most think it's theft or error, but some of us know it's temporal cargo, dimensional instability, equipment that exists in multiple configurations simultaneously, with mass shifting unpredictably during transport. We haul shadows. We deliver diminished versions. We transport equipment that's present here but mostly present elsewhere, split across multiple realities existing in distributed states that confuse scales and violate expectations about cargo remaining constant during transit. The cargo gets lighter the further you drive, not through theft or loss, through dimensional transition, through mass shifting to parallel configurations, through equipment existing in multiple locations simultaneously with unpredictable distribution during transport. I'm still hauling loads, still accepting cargo, still driving routes from Phoenix to Los Angeles and beyond. But now I check bills of lading carefully, looking for warnings about temporal cargo and dimensional instability, looking for notifications that I'll be delivering less than I loaded, that mass will shift during transit, that cargo will vanish progressively as distance accumulates. Most loads are normal, heavy at loading, heavy at delivery, but occasionally I get temporal cargo, equipment that starts heavy and arrives light, diminishing during transport through processes I don't fully understand but have learned to expect. The cargo that gets lighter the further you drive is still being shipped, still being loaded onto trucks by drivers who don't read warnings carefully, still arriving at destinations substantially diminished from original weight, still confusing drivers who expect cargo to remain constant during transit. But it doesn't remain constant, not when equipment exists in multiple dimensional configurations, not when mass shifts unpredictably, not when cargo is present here and elsewhere simultaneously, with balance changing during transport, leaving drivers delivering shadows of what they loaded. I delivered 21,000 pounds out of 47,000 loaded, lost over half during transit. But the payment cleared. The delivery was accepted. The cargo, whatever portion of it arrived, was apparently sufficient. That's the job now. Hauling temporal cargo, transporting dimensional equipment, delivering shadows that represent complete objects existing mostly elsewhere. Watching loads diminish, accepting that heavy at loading doesn't guarantee heavy at delivery. The cargo gets lighter, the weight shifts, the mass relocates, and drivers like me transport the portions that remain, delivering diminished versions while other drivers in other configurations presumably deliver the complementary portions. All of us together hauling complete cargo split across multiple realities. The scales don't lie. The weight loss is real. The cargo disappears. And somewhere else, another driver's cargo is gaining weight, becoming heavier, accumulating mass that's shifting from my load to his, creating balance across dimensional configurations that allows equipment to exist simultaneously in multiple locations while being transported toward multiple destinations through multiple drivers who collectively deliver what individually we could never fully carry. Story 7: The inspection station that only exists after midnight. The mandatory inspection station appeared on I-90 in South Dakota at 12:07 a.m. on September 3, 2024, materializing from darkness between mile markers that shouldn't have facilities. No signs warning of its approach, no lights visible from distance. Just sudden barrier arms dropping across all lanes, forcing all traffic into a facility that hadn't existed moments before and wouldn't exist after dawn. A temporary enforcement point that operated only in the hours between midnight and sunrise, inspecting cargo and drivers according to regulations that weren't in any DOT manual and didn't correspond to any legitimate governmental authority. My name is Catherine Rodriguez, and I spent 4 hours being inspected by officials who checked things that shouldn't be checkable. Not weight or safety or logbook compliance, but other metrics, other measurements, other aspects of trucking that existed in regulatory spaces I'd never encountered. Examining my cargo for qualities beyond physical specifications. Assessing my vehicle for characteristics beyond mechanical function. Evaluating me according to criteria that had nothing to do with professional licensing and everything to do with something else. Something I still don't fully understand, but that determined whether I was permitted to continue driving or whether I'd be detained indefinitely in a facility that disappeared with daylight and took its detainees somewhere that wasn't on any map. The inspector who approached my window looked official. Regulation uniform, proper credentials, professional demeanor. But details were wrong. His badge showed an agency abbreviation I didn't recognize, DTA rather than DIAT. His uniform had patches indicating authority I couldn't verify. His scanner looked like DOT equipment but displayed information that made no sense, metrics that weren't part of standard inspections. License, registration, medical card, and logbook, he requested, standard opening for any inspection. I provided the documents. He reviewed them briefly, then pulled out his scanner and pointed it at me. Not at my paperwork, but at me personally, at my face, at my body, conducting some kind of scan that made my skin tingle and my vision blur momentarily. Psychological clearance level, amber. Temporal displacement index 0.47. Reality coherence 93.2%. Dimensional stability acceptable range. He noted these readings on a tablet, comparing them to some standard I couldn't see. You're cleared for current timeline operation but flagged for secondary dimensional inspection. Please pull your vehicle into Bay 7. What are you measuring? What's psychological clearance level? Standard metrics, assessed during all midnight inspections. Proceed to Bay 7. I followed his directions, pulling into a maintenance bay that looked like standard DOT inspection facility but felt wrong. The lighting was too consistent, no shadows anywhere. The space somehow larger inside than the building's exterior suggested possible. 2 additional inspectors waited, both carrying equipment I didn't recognize. Both moving with coordination that suggested they'd done this thousands of times before. They conducted the strangest inspection I'd ever experienced, not checking my cargo physically, instead scanning it remotely, their devices pointed at my sealed trailer, displaying information about contents that they couldn't possibly detect through metal walls. Not examining my truck's mechanical condition, instead measuring something else. Some property of the vehicle that their scanners quantified but that I couldn't perceive. Cargo compliance temporal, approved. Cargo compliance dimensional, variance detected. Your shipment contains items that exist partially in adjacent realities. Standard for most commercial goods, but this load shows higher than typical cross-dimensional presence. We'll need to verify destination is prepared for multi-reality receipt. My cargo is furniture, standard household goods, nothing exotic. On surface examination, yes, but quantum analysis reveals your furniture exists simultaneously in 2.3 parallel configurations. The couch in your trailer is also a couch in 2 alternate realities, all 3 sharing partial material, presence. During transport, the mass distribution shifts unpredictably between configurations. By the time you deliver, you might arrive with furniture that weighs less or more than loaded, appears slightly different in color or style, shows wear patterns that don't match the originals. That's dimensional variance. And that requires special handling at destination. The inspector showed me scanner readouts, complex data visualizations showing objects existing in multiple states simultaneously, probability clouds indicating where material presence was strongest, charts tracking how mass distributed across parallel realities. My cargo, simple furniture I'd loaded that afternoon, was apparently entangled with versions of itself in other dimensions, all of them sharing existence somehow, all affecting each other through quantum connections I didn't understand. What's the DTNE? What agency are you with? Department of Temporal and Non-Euclidean Transportation. We regulate vehicle operation across timeline boundaries and dimensional interfaces. Standard DOT handles conventional three-dimensional transport. We handle the rest, cargo that exists in multiple realities, vehicles that traverse temporal boundaries, drivers who operate outside normal causality. Midnight inspections are our primary enforcement mechanism. We appear after dark when dimensional barriers are weaker, inspect traffic that crosses our jurisdiction, ensure compliance with regulations governing non-standard transport. I'm not transporting anything non-standard. I'm hauling furniture from Wisconsin to Oregon. Standard route, standard cargo. Your route crosses 7 temporal instability zones and 12 dimensional weak points. At each crossing, your cargo interacts with parallel versions of itself, exchanging quantum information, sharing material presence. By the time you reach Oregon, your furniture will be different, not dramatically but measurably. Colors slightly shifted, dimensions fractionally changed, wear patterns redistributed. Your destination receiving dock is prepared for this. They're registered with DTNE as a multi-reality receipt facility. But we still need to verify your cargo's dimensional variance is within acceptable parameters. They continued their inspection, measuring properties I couldn't perceive, quantifying characteristics that weren't visible, assessing my cargo and vehicle according to regulations that existed in spaces beyond normal DOT authority. The process took hours. Other trucks came and went through the facility, all receiving similar treatment: dimensional scanning, temporal assessment, reality coherence verification. We were all being inspected not just for weight and safety, but for our quantum states, our timeline positioning, our presence across multiple dimensional configurations. Around 3 a.m., the inspector returned with his assessment. Your cargo is cleared with conditional approval. Dimensional variance is within tolerance. However, your vehicle shows temporal drift. You're operating approximately 0.47 seconds ahead of consensus timeline. That's borderline acceptable but concerning. If drift increases beyond 0.6 seconds, you'll be required to undergo temporal recalibration before continuing. I don't understand what that means. How can I be ahead of timeline? You're experiencing time at a rate slightly faster than standard. Most people vary by microseconds. That's normal quantum uncertainty. But you're varying by nearly half a second. That suggests you've been exposed to temporal acceleration field, spent time in location where time moves faster than elsewhere. Common for drivers who frequent certain truck stops, certain way stations, certain rest areas that exist partially outside normal causality. The exposure accumulates, causes temporal drift, eventually requires correction. He handed me a card with an address. If your drift exceeds 0.6 seconds, report to this facility for recalibration. They'll resynchronize you with consensus timeline, eliminate the drift, return you to standard temporal rate. Don't ignore this. Excessive drift can lead to permanent timeline displacement, existence outside normal causality, inability to interact with standard reality. This is insane. Time doesn't work like this. Time works exactly like this. You've just never been measured before. Midnight inspections make it visible, quantifiable, regulatable. You're cleared to continue. Drive safely, and monitor your temporal drift. If you start experiencing time skips, reality glitches, or causality violations, stop immediately and contact DTNE. They raised the barrier. I pulled out of the facility back onto I-90, continuing west. In my mirrors, I watched the inspection station fade, becoming less visible, less substantial, disappearing entirely as I drove away. By the time I'd traveled 5 miles, there was no evidence the facility had ever existed. No lights, no buildings, no barrier arms, just empty highway and darkness. I checked my clock, 4:23 a.m. I'd been in the facility for over 4 hours, but my delivery schedule showed no delay, as if those hours hadn't counted, hadn't occurred, had been removed from timeline. The inspection had taken time but hadn't consumed time, operating in some space outside normal chronology. When I reached Oregon and delivered the furniture, the receiving supervisor checked items carefully, comparing them to photos from loading. Colors are slightly off. Couch is more blue than purple. Coffee table has wear pattern that doesn't match original. Dining chairs are fractionally larger. He noted these discrepancies but accepted delivery anyway. Normal variance for cross-dimensional transport. Within tolerance. Furniture exists in multiple realities simultaneously. Small differences are expected after long distance. Haul. The furniture I'd delivered wasn't exactly the furniture I'd loaded. Close, nearly identical, but changed in subtle ways. Material had shifted between dimensional configurations during transport, leaving me delivering versions that were similar but not identical to originals. And everyone treated this as normal, expected, standard for freight that existed in multiple realities. The inspection station that only exists after midnight is still operating. Still appearing on I-90 in South Dakota, still materializing after dark, still conducting examinations according to DTNE regulations that assess dimensional variance and temporal drift and reality coherence. Other drivers encounter it, get inspected, receive clearances or detentions based on quantum states they didn't know they had. Some drivers fail inspection, show too much temporal drift or dimensional instability or reality incoherence. They get detained, taken somewhere for recalibration, corrected according to standards we don't understand. Most return to driving eventually, resynchronized with consensus timelines, stabilized in primary reality. But some don't return. Some get displaced permanently, exist outside normal causality, operate in timelines where midnight inspections are always happening and morning never comes. I'm still driving, still hauling cargo that exists in multiple dimensions, still crossing temporal instability zones and dimensional weak points. Still accumulating drift currently at 0.52 seconds, closer to the 0.6 threshold, approaching the level that requires mandatory recalibration. I watch for the inspection station every time I drive I-90 through South Dakota at night. Sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't. When I see it, I stop, get inspected, receive clearance or conditional approval. When I don't see it, I wonder if I've drifted too far from consensus timeline, if I'm operating in parallel configuration where the station exists in different location or different timeline or not at all. The inspection station measures what we don't normally perceive: temporal rates, dimensional presence, reality coherence. It quantifies our quantum states, assesses our compliance with regulations governing transport across timeline boundaries and dimensional interfaces. It operates after midnight when barriers are weak and enforcement is possible. And it reminds us that highways don't just connect places in space. They connect places in time, in alternate realities, in dimensional configurations beyond normal perception. Every mile driven crosses invisible boundaries. Every delivery completes transport across multiple realities simultaneously. The inspection station sees this, measures this, regulates this, and drivers who cross its jurisdiction get assessed according to criteria that exist in spaces beyond DOT authority, in regulatory frameworks governing realities we barely understand. I'm currently at 0.522 seconds temporal drift, still within tolerance, still cleared for operation, still driving routes that cross dimensional boundaries and temporal instability zones, still hauling cargo that exists in multiple realities simultaneously. But approaching the threshold, approaching mandatory recalibration, approaching the point where midnight inspection might result in detention, correction, resynchronization with consensus timeline, whether I want it or not. The inspection station waits, after midnight, on highways that cross dimensional boundaries, measuring what we can't perceive, enforcing regulations we didn't know existed, assessing compliance with standards governing transport across realities. And every driver who crosses its jurisdiction gets measured, assessed, cleared, or detained. Gets reminded that trucking isn't just physical transport, it's dimensional transport, temporal transport, quantum transport across realities that intersect on highways existing in multiple configurations simultaneously. The station only exists after midnight, but its regulations apply always. Its measurements persist regardless of visibility. Its enforcement continues whether we see the facility or not. I'm still driving, still measured, still within tolerance, still cleared. But approaching the threshold where measurement becomes intervention, where assessment becomes correction, where clearance becomes detention in facility that exists after midnight and maybe never releases those who drift too far from consensus reality. 0.52 seconds and counting. The drift continues. The threshold approaches. And midnight inspections wait to measure what I've become during all those miles crossing boundaries I didn't know existed.